I thank you very much for tuning into That Will Never Work podcast. What happens when technology accelerates faster than leadership maturity? See, today's guest, Rion Westfall, challenges us to rise to a higher altitude of leadership where human intelligence comes before artificial intelligence and ownership replaces overwhelm. Let's talk about it right after this.
Educate, empower, enable, impact. Thank you for tuning in to That Will Never Work, an award-winning podcast where we share inspiring information and personal experiences related to business and the entrepreneurial journey from those who are leaders in their respective field. Now, here's your host, author and business coach, Maurice.
Again, I thank you very much for tuning in. So, our guest, he helps leaders reclaim human clarity, ownership, and responsibility in an AI-driven world without losing conviction, courage, or connection. And organizations race towards automation, he reminds leaders that altitude comes from awareness, not algorithms. And so, Rion, before AI became the headline, you were already talking about altitude ownership and human leadership. What moment in your journey made you realize leaders were climbing faster than they were thinking?
What moment in my journey? I would say I spent a fair amount of time, just a little history. I spent probably over a decade traveling the world and
Mm-hmm.
doing audits and evaluations on companies in other countries. So I worked in about 15 different countries.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fluent in both English and Spanish, so it opens up a whole different cultures and unique aspects.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless of the place that I went to, whether it was Mongolia, whether it was Armenia, or South Africa, whether it's South America or Central America, even here in the States and Canada regions, I I started seeing common patterns, common uh, sh- just illustrations amongst these companies, amongst the leaders in particular,
Mm-hmm.
where that mindset, that mind shift in them was leading toward, hey, we'll just get the bot to do it. We'll get the
Mm-hmm.
algorithm to do it. We'll get the equipment to do it. Hire somebody else who's developed the technology for A, B, C, whatever it is that they were working for.
Mm-hmm.
And almost without a lack of understanding behind it themselves. And so when you ask kind of what moment, I recognize that after I came off of that kind of global aspect,
Mm-hmm.
I was starting a company of my own and with a couple of partners, and we got to the point we got up to about our first million a month kind of range,
Mm-hmm.
and it was time to go out for it was time to grow even more than what our own capability had.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went out for some private equity. I ended up getting 15 million to help us grow our
Mm-hmm.
business, and this was right before COVID. And I know you got a funny COVID story, but what I noticed was, again, just the reliance, whether it was the money people,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was the companies we were working with. There was just always this constant, oh, well, we'll let AI take it. We'll let the technology do it. We'll do this. And I just started really recognizing so much dependence
Mm-hmm.
on, AI. What does it stand for? Artificial,
Right.
right? You think about it, just artificial. If we look at kind of comparison to our health, hey,
Mm-hmm.
do I want to fill my food, my belly with artificial food? Like I don't want it. I want the organic. I want the rich stuff. If you've had your own chickens and you've eaten your
Mm-hmm.
own eggs, you'd much rather eat that egg than the
Mm-hmm.
store-bought one that's been through the bleach process and all this other stuff. But that's when I noticed, like, hey, this has got to start changing. This has got to start doing something. And so that led to the rise of my latest company, my
Mm-hmm.
latest venture, is really focusing on how do we pull that forward? How do we bring that to face front in companies so that it can actually promote the growth and not be dependent on that artificial aspect.
But see, I think what the challenge is, I'm going to go the artificial food route. We grew up in McDonald's, right? Fast food, right? And unfortunately, in technology, social media, We just see how things are moving so fast, and we want to say, hey, we want to keep up. So unfortunately, we go the fast food route, quote unquote,
Yep.
just so we
Yep.
can say, hey, you know what? Because if we go the real route, of growing up on a farm. I mean, so my grandmother grew up in South Carolina, and so I can relate to you, being on a farm, seeing chickens and having to go to the apple trees and all those type of things, because that's what was my summers were like when I was growing up. And
Yep.
so having to see them take the chickens and kill all that type of stuff. So that type of experience, that takes a while, right? There's a process that you have to go through, and sometimes we get caught up in trying to keep up with the Joneses, stay quick, stay fast, stay agile, idea wise, that we lose that real human, touch the ground space. So how do we stay in that space if we're trying to keep up with everybody else around us, and because artificial intelligence gives us the illusion that we're keeping pace.
You know, I always use this phrase: clarity is power.
Mm-hmm.
It's power for action, but clarity takes work, right? If there's anything that's going to come, if we're going to earn
Mm-hmm.
any amount of clarity in our life, it's going to take work.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I noticed in a lot of my coaching and my helping with my clients, most of my clients, I mean, I travel anywhere from the solopreneur that's just starting a business
Mm-hmm.
all the way to 100 employees before they go big corporate, right?
Right. Right.
And one thing that I find very kind of fascinating. I always look for patterns,
Mm-hmm.
right? Kind of my motto, my theme is I tactically hunt revenue patterns that expedite growth.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I do. Constantly on the hunt, tactically hunting those patterns. And so one of those patterns is one that lack of clarity,
Mm-hmm.
right? When we want to default, hey, I'm going to default my mission of my company to what Chat GPT tells me it is after I fed it a couple prompts.
Right.
Yeah, tell me how that works a year later. It
Mm-hmm.
don't,
Mm-hmm.
it just does not work for businesses. So being able to actually come through and have excuse me, have that clarity in your life, in your business of, hey, what problem am I trying? What problem do I actually solve?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to have a business, whatever it is, what is the problem that I'm solving that no one else is? It might be geography located, it might
Mm-hmm.
be something unique to the industry that you're in, but what is the problem I'm solving that no one else is?
Mm-hmm.
AKA, when somebody asks you, what do you do?
Right.
That's really what they're asking. They're saying, hey, what problem do you solve and how
Right.
can you help me? So they're not asking you what you do. Hey, I use this method and that. No, how can you help me?
Mm-hmm.
And so, to me, that's one of the first steps to that human intelligence. Tapping into the human intelligence is becoming very, very, very clear with what problem it is that you're solving that no one else is.
Mm. So how can I be clear if I'm gonna be honest with you? I'm gonna come from my own corporate America perspective.
Yep.
Corporate America, when I worked in corporate America, unfortunately, I was not clear on my purpose, my why, or whatever it is, because my managers told me to duplicate what they used to do, right? To become who they are, or we have this process because this particular employee over here, they knocking it out. They're doing whatever they got to do, right? And so we lose who we really are in the process. So how do we stay clear, not just on the employee level, but then again, as we go up that chain, mid manager level, senior level, C-suite. Unfortunately, because we've been in that space for so long, we're not always clear about where we are and where we're going.
No, that is one of the most difficult aspects. What you're talking about is a mental mind shift,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's founded in results.
Mm-hmm.
So, as mentioned, as you and I were talking, I've got 4 kids. One of my kids is out of the house. He's down in Brazil serving a mission. My daughter, we actually head this weekend to Florida for the cheer nationals.
Okay.
So they just won, and in Texas, football's a big deal, right? I
Yes.
mean, it just always has been,
Mm-hmm.
and so is the cheerleading that accompanies the football, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so my daughter's team, she just won third time in a row state
Nice.
championship for cheer.
Nice.
And as we were going into this, I actually started working with her as I work with clients and CEOs and owners and this kind of stuff. I try and translate some of that information to my kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just to help them grow. And in this case, it was really the mindset of being able to lock in. My daughter's team and their individuals being able to focus and have
Mm-hmm.
that mindset shift where they're locking in to a result,
Mm-hmm.
right? You talked about a purpose, and my guess is in that corporate world, you probably lost a little bit of what your purpose was.
Right.
You were being told, as you mentioned, hey, I'm being told to fill this void,
Mm-hmm.
and to fill it in the void that the way that leadership told me to fill it in. Hey, Bob has been doing it this way the whole time. You just need to do it like Bob. And if you
Right.
do it like Bob, then you'll be good.
Right.
Right. And to me, that's a huge mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's like telling artificial intelligence, since we're on that topic,
You're right.
of saying, just repeat in the same box.
Right.
Don't think outside that box. That is one of the biggest, most wonderful aspects of us as humans,
Mm-hmm.
is being able to think differently,
Mm-hmm.
right? I like to say, let's work in the boundaries between possible and impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just working in the boundaries of everything that's possible, that gets boring,
Right.
quite frankly. I mean,
Right.
and as entrepreneurs, hey, we get bored, right?
Right. Right.
I want something else to do. Give me some results. Give me something new. Give me
Mm-hmm.
give me that new taste. That sweetness, like what you're talking about
Mm-hmm.
with the food. Give me the rich stuff. That's what we're looking for. We
Right.
don't need more quantity of garbage.
Mm-hmm.
We just need more quality of good stuff. And so, being able to flip your mind, being able to control what's going on in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great study. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. Um, Napoleon Hill wrote a book a long time ago. He's dead now, but
Right.
Think and Grow Rich,
Yes.
right? It's the number one success book that exists on the
Right.
planet by tenfold, right?
Right.
But John Mitchell, he did a study and a work on it and he wrote a book called The Missing Secret.
Mm-hmm.
And in there, it dives in and it starts talking about your mind and the power of your subconscious,
Mm-hmm.
and how 95% of our subconscious is responsible our subconscious is responsible for 95% of all of our actions.
Mm-hmm.
We only actually engage in actions with 5% of our conscious brain. So, how do we start taking that shift? How do we start training our subconscious to be more at the front of our actions for result, for growth, for
Mm-hmm.
expediting? So again, just illustrating. If
Right.
anybody's read it, that's a great thing to go in and look at. But it illustrates the power of our mind, our human intelligence over the artificial intelligence. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think being able to focus on that, being able to push your mind boundaries, to start working in those, in between possible and impossible, that's when you're going to find that fulfillment. That's when you're going to find the happiness that you
Mm.
were that you were talking about.
So unfortunately, because of the parallels of AI and HI, right? And what I'm getting at is that as I'm talking about that corporate America perspective, even from social media, unfortunately, we become robotic in our actions, right? There's no feeling, there's no opportunities for us to grow within that because we're so used to the habits, right? Because sometimes our habits make us robotic, right?
Yep.
And so now we're limiting our growth in that. We're limiting our and I don't want to say we have to put all our emotion in it because sometimes emotions can throw us off as well. You right?
Absolutely.
So how do we make sure that we manage all of that and understand that all of these things are tools to help us in our human intelligence to help us move forward? Because sometimes as you stated, we rely so heavily on it that we can't think outside the box. And sometimes thinking outside the box, we're too fearful of that as well because we made our $1 million being inside the box. Why should I change? If it's not broke, don't fix it mentality. So how do we start thinking outside of that in order for us to grow exponentially?
I love that you bring that up because very similarly, and we'll make this parallel, the AI aspect,
Hmm.
right? It only works with what? With prompts,
Right.
right? It only works within the data set that we've given it.
Hmm.
If it has no access to experience or history or data, then AI just doesn't exist,
Right.
right? It just doesn't.
Right.
So very similarly, our brains are are the same way.
Hmm.
I mean, we have experiences, we have data sets, we have history, and the thing that's most lacking is the ability to tap into it. What is the prompt?
Mm.
What are you giving that? As you know, I started writing my own book at the end of 24.
Hmm.
And in process of doing that, I said, "Hey, how do I strengthen the book itself?" Well, I need more experiences. So I started taking my own your revenue process and I started interviewing business owners in 25. And I got through January and February into the middle of the year. I got to the third quarter and I realized that from my perspective, hey, I'm refining this. It's great, but there's still something lacking. So I ended up developing an app
Hmm.
for the process of probing questions, right? That human intelligence is in our brain. It's in everybody's.
Hmm.
The difficulty we have is the correct prompts, using that analogy, the correct prompts to get that out,
Right.
right?
Right.
To bring that forward into some form of of a cohesive manner that actually creates clarity as opposed to the chaos that
Hmm.
we're kind of more used to.
Hmm.
How do we create that for expediting growth? And so, it turns into an accountability function on our own self. But very similarly, if we don't have a way, if we don't have a method of actually tapping in to the intelligence, into the
Hmm.
human intelligence, it'll never come out. So I like the term probing questions,
Hmm.
very specific probing questions, and I've got dozens of them that I've created over years that work. You change one word and it's just like a prompt.
Right.
It completely changes how AI thinks. It's no different in our brains, right?
Mm.
When we start looking for the right questions, I mean, that's why I call it hunting, right?
Hmm.
We're hunting patterns because it takes work, takes a lot of work, a lot of effort to actually find those. But when we find those, oh man, I mean, that bison meat is a heck of a lot better than the processed whatever at
Right.
McDonald's, right?
Right.
I mean, the venison is so much, whatever it is,
Right.
analogy you want to use. When we actually hunt that and we
Hmm.
start finding those patterns, uh, and we get better at it, quite
Right.
frankly.
Right.
The more you do it, just like anything, you'll get better at it. But you end up also finding a lot more joy in whatever business realm that you're in.
So I have one simple question based off of what you just said. In today's terminology, what is accountability? A lot of us don't understand what that really means, right?
In today's times, what is accountability? Now,
Hmm.
see, right there, that's a probing question,
Yes, it is.
right? That's a wonderful probing question. I like to think of accountability. What is accountability? Accountability is us holding ourselves, I can't use the word accountable because that's part of the definition, right? But us holding ourselves to the standard
Hmm.
of the impossible that we're chasing, right? Because
Hmm.
I like you said, once we get robotic and we get repeat, that's all possible. I know I can
Right.
make pancakes. I know I can make French toast, but what do I want to try that's different?
Hmm.
How do I want to increase my And this goes for our physical bodies and our, we were talking about health and, weight loss and exercise and all this, whatever it is in our life, if we're not searching for
Hmm.
that next step towards the impossible, um to me, that's what accountable means. It
Hmm.
means, one, we recognize where that boundary is, we know what we're not yet doing, but we can see it off there in the distance,
Right.
right? We can kind of feel it, we can almost taste it, but we haven't gotten there yet.
Hmm.
To me, that's accountability, is one, recognizing where that is. Even though we don't understand the entirety of it,
Hmm.
we at least know where it is, but then setting in place the proper steps to get there. To
Hmm.
me, that's accountability. And whether that's business, whether it's personal,
Hmm.
spiritual, with our relationships with our people. You mentioned 25 years of marriage with your
Yes.
wife. I'm just right behind you on that. You know as well as I do that there's times when, yeah,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
there's certain, but we couldn't see 25 years ago what we see now,
Mm-mm.
right? We
Not
couldn't
at all.
see how those relationships with those kids and things that we back then probably would have thought were impossible.
Right.
But, what's next,
Hmm.
right? Where does this go to? What is tomorrow? So if I'm looking forward to what might appear impossible today, what is tomorrow? Hey, as long as I'm progressing
Hmm.
toward that aspect, and I've put in process different steps, different things that I'm actively doing, right?
Hmm.
It takes work. If I'm doing that, to me, that's the definition of accountable. If we're
Hmm.
not doing it, then you're not being accountable. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. And I asked that question, and I asked because it's such a simple question, right? But sometimes we can make the simple way more complicated. So at times, right?
Yep.
And because we might think too deeply about it, we're trying to find the correct answer in that, and like you stated, being married for 25 years, I'm always trying to find the right answer to say to my wife.
Valentine's is coming up. What do I do now? This one. I've only been through. I still don't know what to do.
I know, right? Here comes a birthday, what do I do now? And so now as we are looking into as a business owner, we're accountable to our customers, both
Right.
internally and externally, right?
Yep.
So how do we ensure that we are answering the call, answering the bell, because we get so caught up on the outside. But what about being accountable to us, staying true to our values, our morals, our business ethics, whatever it is, in order for us to stay on mission and the vision of the organization, and so that's why I asked such a simple question that a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we get lost because we get caught up on maybe, like you stated, what AI, how they might answer it, right? And if you don't put in the right information, you're going to get crap out, mentality, like you stated.
There's a phrase that I always use with people that I work with, and I say, if it's not written down, it's a liability.
Mm-hmm.
If it is written down, it's an asset.
Mm-hmm.
So as I was, what is known today as my Own Your Revenue process, as I was going through and doing all of these audits and evaluations, and sometimes it might be, 4 days, other times it'd be 4 weeks, on these 24-hour shift stuff that I'd be
Mm-hmm.
doing these, hard on evaluations. And that was a pattern that I
Mm-hmm.
recognized. Companies that had liabilities, they had issues here and here, it's often because it was never written down.
Right.
Whatever it was, whether it's an office procedure, whether it's an out in the
Mm-hmm.
field procedure, whether it's within the plant, whether it's how to, like you said, how do we handle our clients?
Right.
What is the process that our clients go through to, how do we find them? How do
Mm-hmm.
we interact with them? How do they become a client? How do they step? We're just not clear on that aspect. So to me, absolutely, if we're finding And usually when I would do this, I'd have these war rooms. You've been in them where, it's wall to wall whiteboards all over the place. I got red
Right.
markers and greens and blues and, arrows everywhere. And
Right.
I actually still use that process.
Nice.
Like
Okay.
today, I still have it. I have a digital whiteboard because
Hmm.
I service clients all over, but I still use that because it's it's part of the process. Like you
Right.
said, there are steps to unlocking that human intelligence.
Hmm.
And if we walk the right steps, and if we write the right things down,
Hmm.
those are going to become assets as opposed to the liabilities that they currently are and the chaos that exists.
Right.
Those are going to become assets that, again, that clarity is power. That power
Right.
leads to action, and that action will lead to the result. So 100% agreed with you on that.
So I appreciate you coming on the show, and there's one action that I really want the clients or those that are listening to us, what I would really like for them to take. Ryan, let them know where they can find you on social media or your website or whatever it is, so they can know how they can reach you and listen to any more of your information, listen to you talk about driving a truck or, play baseball, whatever it might be.
Absolutely. I'm heavy on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
So Rion, Rion. So it's a different spelling like lion,
Right.
but Rion Westfall, as well as my website, which is 537BD, stands for business development. We're developing business. So 537BD or LinkedIn is probably the best place to go from there. But
Mhm.
on the websites, on the LinkedIn, you'll have all my contact information, the ability to even create your own accounts and stuff for the dashboards for these processes that have been developed.
So, and I thank you very much. So, those of you that are listening and you reach out to him on LinkedIn, ask him what does 537 mean. And he'll tell so let's not give it up, Ryan, but ask him what it
There we go.
means. But I thank you very much for coming on the show. So, everything that we've talked about today really comes down to how we think, how we lead, and how we respond to change. So, I have to ask you this question that I ask everyone that comes on the show. My would you rather question. Would you rather choose 3 doors or a fork in the road?
My mind goes to a fork in a road.
Okay.
And I can't remember who said it, but it's stuck in my mind forever. He says, "Whenever you come to a fork in a road, take it."
That's simple.
It's kind of like that Cheshire cat, right? With Alice in Wonderland. It's like,
Right.
hey, which way should I go? Well, where do you want it? Just take it. Just run with it,
Right.
right? So to me, that'd be my short answer.
And so there's no wrong way to go because you're going to learn one way or the other.
I've spent many seasons hunting out in the woods,
Hmm.
hunting out in nature. And forks in the road are very, very common,
Hmm.
especially when you don't know the area. Now, when it's getting dark and you're trying to get home, that's a little bit of a different story, right? Because
Right.
there's a little bit of pressure. You want to get home. But I've noticed if I took the left path, and even if that shortly led to a dead end, I'm not upset about that
Hmm.
because I now know that the left road ends in a dead end. I can come back to that fork and then I can go right.
Right.
So, running down a dead end road every now and then at those forks is not a bad idea because it actually gives us confidence
Hmm.
in the other path that we know it's going to go somewhere.
And so my in my visual mind, as I look at that wall, that dead end, maybe it's a sign that I might need to take a rest for a second, right? Maybe it has some water coming down the wall or something like that. Maybe I need to take a drink. Maybe it's a
Yep,
sign,
yep.
for something else.
Grab that sandwich out of your pack and just take a break.
Right. But Ryan, I thank you for reminding us today that leadership isn't about keeping up with technology. It's about staying ahead of ourselves. And I thank you very much for challenging us to lead with attitude, clarity, and ownership in all that we do. And those of you that are listening, I would really like for you to audit one decision this week before you lean on a tool instead of your judgment, and ask yourself, am I leading from convenience or conviction? I thank you very much for listening today.
Thanks for listening. Follow Maurice Chisholm on social media to stay connected and check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, that will never work. Or will it?